Hey everybody, it's Paul with reporting live from my sofa, and I'm on a little field trip today in the truck in the Lowe's parking lot because it's 7 a.m. and it's very early and I don't want to wake everybody up at the house and get the dogs going any more than they already are. So as you already see from the title, today we are talking about the DSS worker, Sherry Henry, and some of her testimony. I just wanted to go over some aspects of it. I already did a timeline on this case that was told through the DSS reports, and so I don't want to get muddled down in this particular video with, well, on this date she said this, on that date they said this, because honestly I found it very confusing, and I just don't think that it really made that much sense. And then I felt like the testimony also was one of those things where after the fact, you heard the babysitter's testimony and things of that nature, you got a full picture of things, and maybe that was intentional, I don't know. So I just want to talk about a few of the things that Sherry brought up, or that was brought up on the stand, or lack thereof, we should say. Now, also, my notes are right here, so if I'm looking down like this, it's okay, y'all, I'm just checking the computer out. So now, Sherry Henry, I mean, overall sounded like, okay, I got in here, I started off as a temp, I eventually worked my way up to a supervisor role, so I'm like, okay, cool. Now, this is one place that I was just like, okay, what? Because remember, in the timeline, if you read it, it was like DSS was constantly involved in their life. I mean, just constantly, and you really didn't know who called the reports in. Well, after you hear Sherry's testimony, as well as the babysitters and stuff like that, you get an idea of, oh, this is who was doing what. So one of the first things that happened was like Natan's K-5 teacher, who apparently is like a mandated person. She has to call this in. She did. Sherry comes to the school. She sees marks on Natan. She calls the father. They have a meeting. And basically, and I'm going to read my notes here. So now this is one thing that I was confused by, because later on, I think when the prosecutor questioned her, she was like, read what you wrote down here. And it's like, writes that the allegation was that Nathan did something wrong and Tim choked him and held him down, and there was a bruise on his neck. So I don't know if that was her findings or if that was the allegation and she wrote that down. I don't know where that came from, honestly, at this point. I mean, it was said, so I was a little murky on that, and I've been binging this thing the whole weekend, and so some of it, my notes, I'm like, what was I writing? So anyways, if any of y'all know that for certain, please clarify it down in the comments. But this is where, let's just talk about that event at school. So apparently this was like a 0 to 2 assessment, which meant, look, this is high priority. We have to get out there like in a couple of hours and meet these people. And so that's what she does. And so, again, now here's what he said. So he told her that him and another child built a train track and that Natan destroyed it or something. And so he picked him up by the collar and spanked him. And basically from this meeting, and it sounds like that she did see marks. Yeah, she went to school, she saw the marks. That's when she calls Tim to come meet her at the office. And so they come up with an action plan not to use discipline. And then she right then and there follows him back to the house to do like a surprise immediate visit to see how the kids are doing, reacting. She says there's clutter in the house, but it's not unsafe. Essentially, she describes it as, imagine what any house would look like that has a single father raising 5 children. And that's what it looked like. And okay, got it. I can already imagine what my house would look like. And so that's what she makes it out. And then later she does, now there was another case, and I'm writing this one, and this is the one that I think was the babysitter. And so this is the one where it was like the kids are only eating a 20-piece nugget at a time, or, about the feeding. And fast forward, when we hear the babysitter talk, to me, that's where that's coming from. Like, she's reporting this, the spanking at the thing at Disney World and things of this nature. But the surprise visit, so this is kind of what I want to talk about, because honestly, I feel like when we get into the babysitter's testimony, which is going to be a different video, some of that stuff is probably more of truth, all the babysitter's videos, but especially Joy's, that's going to be a little bit more of the truth or whatever. So DSS Miss Sherry Henry, I thought she was well-spoken. I thought she got up there. Everything sounded good in theory, if that makes sense. Like, what she was saying was, we dotted our I's and we crossed our T's, essentially. It's the way I took it. But obviously it wasn't good. She was retired. I'm imagining that a lot of people in that case probably, were let go or something happened to them. Because the reality is, it's like, and even she was saying, like, and again, if this is really the way it went down, where she was like, okay, I went ahead and followed him home. I wanted to see what the house looked like and to just immediately surprise him. Okay, awesome. I mean, I can see that working. And then other times of having to go there with the police officers and stuff like that. But what she was describing to me each time was not overly seeing something that was like, oh, wait, except for, the first time where there was obviously bruising and stuff done. And so I'm sitting here, and that's where I don't know how that system works very well. Now, I actually did a collab with somebody recently, and I am trying to get the video up and edited and done. And hopefully I will soon, especially now that I've seen this part, because she worked with a DS. She worked with this agency, not that particular one, but she gave insight into this is what it's really like behind the scenes, and it's shocking. I mean, it's shocking. You're just like, oh my God, especially if it's like, yeah, they're so overworked and this, that, and the other, and if people don't care, it's this situation waiting to happen. So, part of my thing with Sherry's testimony is it all sounded good in theory, and what she's describing, I'm like, okay, but then I'm just like, well, why wasn't something really done? Because these surprise visits where it was like, okay, the house needs to be cleaned, like it's, excessive. Something didn't make sense about it, because I was like, something's not being told here. Because again, if there's signs of like, oh, this kid showed signs of being choked, or, I think that spanking to the point of bruising, and a DSS worker is seen bruising, I'm like, that didn't raise a red flag. And then you heard them say also, if you've watched her testimony, where it was like a paperwork mishap where it said unfounded or something like that. It's just like, no, it was meant to be founded. So you see how these things go. But like also listening to the talk of it, she talked very clinical. We were going to the house to assess risk. I wanted to go there and assess risk, which I get, that's their terminology, but it doesn't sound like, and maybe that is good to not be emotional. I don't know, because I wanted to hear like, oh my God, the kids were off. You see all this emotional testimony, and the DSS worker gets up there, and I mean, she's probably seen this 100 times over and 10 times, worse when she goes to houses. And so maybe that's why there was no level of, I don't know. She just painted a picture like everything looked fine. So, and I guess to me, so one thing I'm trying to sit here and think is, I'm like, okay, so they probably see everything under the sun, and maybe she went there and it was like, oh, some bruising from spanking isn't a big deal from what I see. The house looks messy, but it's a guy with 5 kids. Excessive religious items. I mean, isn't it interesting how much religion is brought into this case? But I guess that's for I think a lot of people's, because like I was reading comments and people were like, oh my God, she was a failure and this and that and the other. And I definitely, because I guess I was just confused by her testimony, honestly, because I just am like, I don't get like, I mean, I'm like, well, why wasn't something done? I don't understand why they just basically filled a piece of paper out and said, here, don't do this. Because we clearly see when we talked to the babysitter, or the one particular babysitter, that he was still beating the kids pretty severely and doing some creepy stuff with the exercise and stuff like that. And so it sounds like, to me, what it sounded like is they went and they basically apply a paper form to these situations, and they say, okay, we check this, okay, here's the thing that you're supposed to do, sign this paperwork, we've done this, we've done that, okay, we're done here, when there's really no depth to it. And if that's a way to even say that. And so then with her being like, well, I'm going to go home and surprise them and stuff like that. Or like she popped in on the birthday party. And let's see, I'm just going to read through this real quick. House of Summit. Basically it came down to where there's no risk. But this is where I think these systems fail. And take even this particular one out of the water. I look at it as, we can talk about it in the iceberg effect. At the very tip, you see just the tip of the iceberg, and there's a lot beneath it. Let's look at Sherry as the tip, and what she visually was seeing as the tip of the iceberg. And now some of that tip was like, really, that was okay to leave the children in that situation? I don't know, obviously, what the laws are and what the modus operandi is for we get a call, someone saying that, this teacher, if a teacher's calling and making a complaint and then you're going and seeing marks on the kid, I mean, to me, I'm like, really? Like, that's not means for extracting the children or getting other people involved. And I understand that that's a severe, step, but hindsight when there's 5 children dead is always clear. But so the teacher makes this phone call, she gets in there and all that. So I just feel like, okay, they fill out this paperwork, they do all this stuff. That's right, we're in the iceberg effect. But beneath the surface, there's so much more to it than that. And so beneath the surface in this is Joy's testimony. And, what all is going on there. And you're like, oh, my God, these kids are only eating oatmeal. There's bugs in the house. There's this, there's that. And now, granted, but she happened to catch him on a day where she was like, no, the house looked cluttered. You never know. What if the DSS worker, is a hoarder? And so her version of what's cluttered is completely different than what somebody else's is. There's so many factors. What if the DSS worker is completely fine with spanking, your child? And so to them, like, oh, a little bruising, that's the norm. I mean, I don't know how that works. You know what I'm saying? But I would just think that, and if the kids are all saying, oh, fine, and they're not acting scared of him, because I can see that being like, yeah, we want to naturally see how these kids are reacting, and then going back to the school and being like, well, yeah, he was reserved and he was this and that. So I mean, to me, there were signs where maybe this could have escalated to the next level. I mean, if she was sitting here trying to be like, well, we don't want to remove the kids and put them in foster care. Matt and I have dealt with the foster care system, and let me tell you what, I mean, it's a nightmare. It is a nightmare. A nightmare. And so I am like, you know what? I can understand people who they want to try everything possible for putting children in that, because once they're in that, it's awful. Now, mind you, again, hindsight is, wow, these children would be alive. So, I don't want to sit here and excuse it away for that, because, it is what it is. But don't we see this often? And I don't remember the case, but remember the one where the parole officer, I think, was going to the person's house, and like they had a person in captivity for years in the backyard. I think it was Elizabeth Smart, who had like kids. I mean, he got her pregnant. I mean, it was something bizarre like that. And like the parole officer had like been to the house numerous times and never caught this. And so you know what I mean? So it's like, okay. We see this all the time, and I mean, these systems are so overburdened. And, I can't speak to, I mean, again, and I mean, this is a story time to do separately about the DSS stuff. But I'm sorry about the foster care stuff. And I mean, just my dealings with that, I was like, oh my God, it's exhausting. We dealt with a caseworker in there who was overly invested in the kids, and which I thought was amazing. But you also saw it worked both ways. Because of it was almost like a overbearing parent or whatever. There were some things that went on, like minuscule stuff that, again, in comparison to the ones that didn't care about the kids, which was the average, I would take the overbearing one. The overbearing one just, in my opinion, did some things like with schooling and stuff that I was like, no, that's not right. You know what I'm saying? Like this child needs to learn the lesson of you got to do your homework. You don't do homework for people. So things like that I was just like, no, you don't do that. But take that out of it. I'm going totally off track here. These systems are so overburdened, and I'm just like, that's what they do. They go boom, 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 boom. They have to go touch each house. Okay, let's dot our I's, let's cross our T's, let's move to the next. So again, that's what happens with these things. Is like people like him are allowed to keep these kids, and he's probably putting on a show. The kids, and somebody, I think it was Joy saying, their kids, they love their dad. I mean, these were young children. They don't know, they don't understand that it's not normal for their dad to make them do all these squats. You know what I'm saying? And this crazy workout stuff. I mean, that's the thing. Like, you're going to want to love your parent. You know what I mean? Like, you just are. You don't really know at that age that something's abnormal or different. And so I can see where it's like, well, no, they clearly love their dad. I mean, you know what I mean? So a caseworker walking into the scene, that might be what they're seeing. And behind the scenes, they just don't see the dark side. Or unfortunately, sometimes they don't really want to see it, and they're just doing their job and moving along. So whatever the way, it's completely heartbreaking. And, you know, you're just listening to this and you're like, my God, it's like, it's always like if something had been done, they could have, you know, if they had just been taken from the home, they'd be alive. This wouldn't be happening. You know, if maybe more questions were asked, if something was a little bit more persistent, because I just don't think if somebody's doing something like that to their kids and, you know, you do, here's an action plan, you're not allowed to touch the children. And I get where it's like, okay, if we get another report, but you're relying on so much of like a person reporting, you know, this, that, and the other. I mean, do you think the parent's going to sit there and, I mean, maybe they do, maybe they find a different way to abuse a child then, you know what I'm saying? Which clearly, you know, working them out to death. So anyways, I'm going off on another tangent. This video is becoming long. I really want to hear what y'all have to say about her testimony. So drop it like it's hot in the comment section, and we will talk soon. Bye.